Hi, I'm Guy Bacchus. In this video, I'll guide you through a passage from my synchronized orchestral strings demo. We'll break it down step by step, starting with the initial motivic ideas played on the piano and progressing to a fully orchestrated piece. We'll focus on how each section was orchestrated with special emphasis on synchronized orchestral strings. Let's dive in. In the first section, I use the polychord technique. A famous example of this is in the well-known section of Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring. I often use this technique in my own works, as you'll see in this passage. Let's take a closer look at the harmonic structure of the opening section, featuring slightly more extended chords. I then add a second chord that is similar to the first, and I alternate between the two, like this. This will become the harmonic framework I use for this section. Following that, I introduce this brief melody. The next section transitions into a more lyrical style, with less tension in the harmony. Let's play these four chords again, but this time I'll add a subtle counter melody, which could later be assigned to the cellos. Following that, I'd bring back elements of the opening section. And here, I expand a bit more the lyrical section. Now I have the main ideas, and after experimenting with them, they evolved into this. In the previous section, instead of just sustaining the chords, consider giving them more movement. This will also help you be better prepared for the orchestration phase. Now we move on to the orchestration. Let's start by focusing on this two-chord pattern. I think it will sound great with the strings playing staccato. I'll use harsh spiccato articulation on the downbeats of the double bass notes to give it a more percussive feel. We'll start by listening to the piano version. Right after, we'll hear it arranged for the string section. You may have noticed the addition of some syncopation to the accompaniment, giving it a little more character. Now, let's look at how we can strengthen the accompaniment. I want the downbeats to feel heavier, so I'll have the horns and trombones play short notes on those beats, accompanied by timpani hits while the snare will play on the upbeats. Remember this fragment? I think a percussion instrument would work well here. The xylophone immediately comes to mind, and rather than repeating it twice, I'll have the marimba echo it. Let's bring all these tracks together and listen to the result. We'll now move on to the next section. Even though this section differs in style from the opening, I wanted to preserve the momentum, so I maintained a similar rhythmic pattern in the accompaniment. First, let's play this part on the piano. In this section, I'll assign the first and second violins to the upper parts, while the cello will play the line I previously suggested as a fitting counter melody. For the accompaniment, I'll have the double basses play pizzicato, while the violas will handle the chords, which would typically be played divisi. Incorporating brief arpeggio or glissando passages by the harp in certain spots can bring a lovely touch of color to the orchestration. We'll now listen to this passage with all the parts. See if you can pick out the harp and its warm effect. Remember this passage? This passage would sound great with each line played legato, both viola and cello divisi. However, in this case, the tremolo articulation seems to be more effective. So let's give that a listen. Let's focus on the high strings in this passage, which the first and second violins will play. Ideally, this should be played divisi, but when working with virtual sounds, compromises are sometimes necessary. If it sounds good, it's good. However, if ever you plan to have this performed by a live orchestra, keep in mind that some sections will need to be written as divisi. When working with synchronized orchestral strings, an alternative for handling divisi sections is to use the chamber strings library, which allows you to work with smaller groups of players. So now let's listen to the first and second violins. How about we combine all these parts and see how they sound together? Now let's bring in the brass section. Instead of relying on simple sustained chords, Let's avoid making it too passive. It's worth spending some extra time to craft a more engaging brass line. What would the orchestra be without percussion and harp? Here are the timpani, piatti, and harp parts for this section. Notice how the timpani swells create a sense of heightened tension. Now we come to the runs and glissandos. I'm sure you've heard them in the piece, and I certainly haven't overlooked them. When composing new pieces, I always take into account the available articulations in the library I'm using. With the synchronized orchestral strings library, I always keep in mind the wonderful scale runs and glissando options at my disposal. Being aware of these in advance plays an integral role in my composition process. In this part of the piece, I'm incorporating a few scale runs and a glissando. I'll start by playing the piano version of this section, along with these special articulations on the violins. It may sound a bit odd for now, but don't worry. The goal is to isolate these runs so you can hear them clearly. Let's try that again, but this time we'll place the special articulation within the string arrangement and transition them into the sustained notes as smoothly as possible. Now all that's left is to listen to the entire passage with full orchestration. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching and see you next time.